Hello everyone, my name is Duncan Bruus. I'm the Alumni Manager at the NFTS, and thank you for joining us at this NFTS Backstory. Tonight's guest is an amazing DP and one that I absolutely adore, and her name is Charlotte Bruus Christensen. And if you've seen A Quiet Place or Fences or Girl on the Train or Far from the Madding Crowd or The Hunt, there's so many good films that Charlotte has shot. So without further ado, let's actually just chat to Charlotte. Hello.
Hello, everyone. That was a nice introduction. Thank you, Duncan.
Pleasure. We should introduce them to your location, which is your artistic space.
Yeah, I can start by this is my firstborn daughter. This is her room, and we're living in a barn house in Denmark, which is where we sort of go to in between movies. And it's a very open space. So I thought, as the kids are still up, I'm going to go to Vera's room because it's probably the one that's furthest away. So yeah, that was her first little goose. It could be, and then a nice bookshelf in the background there. So I thought that was good. That was working. Nice lights from, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to persuade people it was your office.
Yeah,
and that's what it looks like.
Oh, okay. With a plant.
Okay, well, we may as well start with the most obvious starting point, which is you and how you got interested in cinematography and where that passion came from, and what was your route to finding that first step in a career?
Well, I grew up at a farm in the middle of nowhere in Denmark, if there is such a place in a small country. It felt like in the middle of nowhere because there was no cinemas nearby or anything like that. So my dad's a farmer and my mum's a hairdresser and had this sort of local little hairdressing shop or whatever it's called. So I wasn't, it wasn't, you know, none of my parents or family are in the film business. So Hollywood's very far away from where I grew up. But and I didn't know what this specific job, what cinematography actually was till I was sort of in my teens. But I do remember, as you know, my early years sort of wanting to steal or sort of borrow without them knowing my parents 35, at that time it was 35mm camera, and go around and take little shots. And it would often be, you know, tell a little story. So I would actually set it up and have my brother, you know, do something or wear shiny shoes, and then you know, the businessmen came to the farm and they would have a little story, and it'd be sort of 10 or 15, and I would get them printed and line them up. And so there was an instinct of I guess telling stories. You know, I also loved just writing little poems and stuff like that. So the whole thing of telling stories were I don't know, just was there from the beginning. And I remember also the thing of light, wanting to look at light, because we had at the hayloft is an old farm, and so some of the, you know, parts of the roof were missing, or there was a hole like from a stone or something. So I knew at that time of day the sun will be going down. If I throw the hay in the air, the dust will sort of. So I would sort of disappear into corners of the farm or in the field. Sounds very romantic. I don't know if it was. It probably was when I look. But it was sort of you know, an interest that I had from a very early age. And then my dad sold another farm that we had to our film composer, and he had horses and I was a horse girl. And so we started writing together, and he's 30 years older than me. And he was telling me he's a very passionate man. He was telling me how he was working with directors and how he was, you know, getting information and translating it into music. And he one day saw my pictures, and he said, you know, there's a job where you do that. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, look at the TV. That's, you know, telling a story with images. And so it sort of became, you know, I became aware of it in my sort of teens, 15, 16. And so from then on, it was something, but he also said there isn't a lot of girls doing this. So, you know, you should maybe better to write or direct or, So I didn't want to, that sort of stayed with me. So I didn't want to tell anybody. So I got into the film school and, you know, as a runner and did coffee but I didn't want to, just wanted to get close to the cinematographer and see what he was doing, but I didn't want to tell anybody. So I found a way to make little films and then sort of nobody knowing, just me and whatever little PD 150, whatever they're called. And then I got into the European Film College, which is an amazing place in Ebeltoft in Denmark, where lots of people from all over the world, 100 young people go, and it's sort of a playground if you want to find out if it is something for you. So I was lucky to get there, and then where I met my husband, Stefan. But it was a great place for me because at least I could share with people that I wanted to try and get this camera and tell little stories. So it was sort of like, I obviously also was very excited to see films, but it was sort of the yearly event to go to the cinema, you know, on a birthday or something. That was my wish to go to. So it was very, you know, sort of go and see Greece or Titanic or something. So it wasn't exploring other people's work. It was an instinct. It became after, you know, Ebeltoft and the first little film schools, and obviously then it became more about studying cinematography and filmmakers. So yeah, that was the beginning.
You mentioned something, and I've got to ask it because you brought it up, but your friend the composer said there isn't a lot of women in this particular field. So when you started to say to people, I'd really like to go into cinematography, was there a reaction of, this isn't an area where there's a lot of women, or did you not find any of that kind of reaction?
It was suggested, not in a nasty way, you know, but in a helpful way. People wanted to help. Actually, it wasn't because today, you know, it was way before the whole, you know, wave of, you know, everything that's going on at the moment. But I think people were doing it not to put me down, but they were saying, you know, you don't want to waste your life, and we just, you know, but you might be able to, who knows. So I think there was also, but there was definitely a lot of people saying, just make sure you have another idea, or sort of have an open door to another subject, or maybe keep writing, you know, or stills photography. Yeah. Just don't go sort of single-eyed on that only. So it scared me, I remember, but I also was so feeling it in a way that I knew I wanted to explore it. But it did sort of, I was very hesitant in sort of sharing it in a way. So, but I think once I started to make little short films, I also felt, but this is very natural to me. I know where to put that camera. I feel like, you know, not that there's only one place to put it, but I sort of connected with, you know, the vision and the direct, you know, working with the director and all that was I was so excited about it and so passionate. Like, I guess you all are, you know, it's just that, you know, that eagerness to get in the field and make movies together in a very simple, low-key way.
So then you and Stefan both applied to the National Film and Television School, I think at the same time.
Yes.
For two different courses. You wanted to be a cinematographer, he wanted to be a sound designer.
Yeah.
And you both got in.
We both got in, yeah.
Did that give you some kind of feeling of validation of, right, so people obviously think I can do this craft now, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, it was a huge surprise because we met each other at the European Film College, made a little short film when we got out, and we thought we got a little short film, let's apply. So I applied both to the Danish Film School and the National Film and Television School. And the Danish Film School, they have all these, you know, tests that you have to have 6 or 7 tests, and sort of halfway through, there was sort of a comment, you know, sort of just overall knowledge, you know, test. Like you have to, who's the most famous violin player in Denmark? And I was like, what? I was sort of up in, you know, focusing on light and cinema and that. So I was lost, and apparently I got 2 out of 50 right or something. So I didn't go on. And at the same time, luckily we got to, you know, towards the end at the NFTS. So It did. I also felt, I think I was a little bit of a wild card at the NFTS because I didn't have a BA. And at the interview I had at the time, it was with Brian Tufano, who you may all know, wonderful mentor. But I think he sort of said, I think once I got in, there was something that I felt that he did say, you're you're the last straw sort of thing. So I was very excited, but I also kept feeling very humbled about the whole thing. And also because I was Danish and maybe my English wasn't as good. And so I was very, maybe humbled is the right word. So I was standing in the back, not saying a lot the first year, just observing. I was the quiet girl, believe it or not, Duncan.
I can't believe it, but it's fine. I'm very grateful for the Charlotte I have now.
Yeah.
So obviously at the NFTS you made some short films, and in fact I think the one that you did with Stefan was actually the most helpful. Which
yes,
Stefan direct?
We directed together. So so the advice I had when I was sort of in my late teens and I was starting to tell people, I think it's really excited, this thing about lighting and the camera, and I want to do more. And they were all saying, how exciting for you, but don't go all in because you probably won't make it. And they all said, why don't you keep writing? And so I did, because I took that advice on board. And I've always thought, I might not get there, but this is exciting. So I kept writing, and I'm a terrible writer, absolutely useless, but I love it, and I think from an early age, sort of mid-teens and onwards, and still it helps me study scenes. I use it as a, what is the words and how do you translate words into light? What is it? What are the words that gives you a certain feeling? How can you create a feeling, not just making the image beautiful and make it day or night or dawn or dusk or whatever it is, but how do you actually get the feeling that the script and the, so I was very into, and I remember that was my whole dissertation at the film school and stuff, was about translating words to images, that getting that feeling. So anyway, I kept writing, and we did this Kodak Award thing, and we were first years, and we were very lucky to sort of get a roll of film, and because it was a second year sort of competition. And so Stefan and I did it sort of secretly and handed it in, and of course what happened, we won the whole thing. So we won money and film stock, 35mm film stock, to do a little short film. And so we like, I have all these 50 little scenes, short film scenes that I've written over the years, because maybe I actually have to end up being, a writer, which I would never succeed in, but I'm still doing it. But anyway, so we picked one of those, and we picked one called Between Us, because it was, two kids in two cars, and they sort of meet in a traffic jam, and it's just a silent little love story, first love between two kids, sort of 7-8 years old. And so it's an interesting exercise for me, to tell a story in the backseat of a car with no dialogue, and for Stefan with the sound. So we thought, this is great. We handed it to all the directors, and they read it, and they're like, what the is this? I mean, nobody was like, who wants to make a drama about two kids not talking? And I think it was a great idea, but it was terribly written. So we decided to then just go and direct, co-direct it so that I could shoot it. And the short film was very successful. So it went on. We won Best Upcoming Directors, which was very much in the way because then nobody wanted to work with me as a DP, which is what I wanted to be. But so what happened was that short film, by some route that I still haven't figured out, ended up with Thomas Vinterberg's producer in Denmark. And I think that I gave it to my friend who's a producer, and I think that what happens is that Thomas's producer was to pick up a showreel on her desk, and he picked up the wrong one, whatever. I ended up and had an interview, and that all went really well. So yes, so that little short film that we did at the end of our stay at the NFTS was sort of got me, the first feature film with Thomas Vinterberg called Submarino, a film that I love, but made for hardly no money, $500,000 or something, very low budget. But we shot on 16mm.
I was shot on 16mm, yeah.
Yeah. It's a great experience.
You'd have to admit that, you know, I think Oliver Stapleton says it to our students at the moment, as does Stuart Harris, that part of the magic of being a cinematographer is skill, but also the luck. You just have to be, you're lucky wherever you are. You can't predict how something's going to land.
No. And I keep saying, you know, when I'm at the film school or other film schools or any platform where you can talk to people, like there is, in whatever business you do, you know, and I truly believe that everybody needs luck, but you also have to see it, you know. So I keep saying, you know, if you're too busy saying, oh, I'll never be lucky, or it's never going to happen to me, you won't see it, but it might be right in front of you. So I think there's also something in looking for that luck and sort of appreciating it. And it's, you know, because once you're lucky, you then have to prove that you can fulfill the expectations, you know. So, you know, I think everybody is lucky at some points. It's just spotting it and using it, and then put all your talent and all your energy into sort of being grateful that you were lucky, but now you have to turn that into your you know, the facts, which is, you know, you can't keep on going being lucky. But I truly believe that you have to have a bit of luck, and you know, to put your ticket in there, you have to do little things, whether you go and use this one and do stuff, and you send it to someone. Well, that's the ticket for the luck, because in that one, like with my show reel, somebody passes on and he's like, oh my God, that's just exactly what we're looking for. Who is that? So I think, you know, it's about throwing those tickets in, and they don't cost money like a lot, you know, lottery thing, which I don't believe in. But I believe in the human sort of, you know, looking for luck. I believe that you can put those tickets out and constantly talk and be without, and it's not just Instagram. No. I also want to say, because that's very hard. There is so much of it, and it's great. I love Instagram, but I also am probably very old fashioned, but I do believe the contacts, or sending an email with a little film that you've done on this one, or, you know, that it travels, and it should.
So before we go into the Thomas Vinterberg films, at what point did you get an agent? Because I know that's something a lot of cinematographers ask me. When should I get an agent? When should I look for an agent? How do you get an agent? How did that come about for you, that first agent?
I mean, at the graduation, I remember everybody, you know, when we screened our films, knew that, you know, there would be agents in the room. So I remember sort of from the beginning, I was exactly in that same spot. I mean, how do you get there? Do you want to get there? Is it too early, or is it helpful, or, you know? So I was exactly in that sort of like what. So I just remember after the graduation show thinking, you know, maybe it's good to, on the back of that, sort of just send out an email. Or try and somehow say, you know, this is me amongst all the others. So I remember I did that, and I went into a couple of sort of just meetings, and then I wasn't promised anything. They just said, you know, come and have a coffee. And so United Agents, which is at the time I think was PFD, not PDF, PFD. They said, listen, we can't take you on. You don't have what it takes yet, but we think you're exciting. And so why don't you just sort of hang around, and, you know, we can take you out, look at some sets and stuff. So I was sort of on a list that wasn't the real list, but at least I had someone, and that was Linda Marnie. And then she had an assistant, and then that assistant was sort of breaking off and was doing her own thing. And she sort of picked me up and said, you know, I'm new, you new, what do you think? And so I thought, why not? And so we just found a lot of short films, you know, earning no money, probably earned whatever, $2,000 a year or something crazy. So that was sort of, it's a very soft way, and it was over 2 or 3 years from sort of at least having a contact, but wasn't signed, and then someone, and again, you know, it's that thing of putting your ticket in there without necessarily expecting that, you know, this conversation is going to get me on the list and get me, you know, my website on their website. And, you know, I think there's a thing of sort of knowing that the whole thing is something that builds, and every little conversation or contact, a little email, even though you might not get a response immediately, somebody's read it. You never know. And so I really encourage people to not expect that's, you know, the lock sort of just dumping down all the time. And I do remember the agent thing was definitely over 2 or 3 years before they signed me, and then it was with a new agent, Sylvia Laguna, who's now, you know, a great agent. So we helped each other, you know, in a way.
So it's a good lesson to learn that, you know, for people thinking, you know, you went to your graduation ceremony. You didn't walk out and go, I'm Charlotte Bruus Christensen, ta-da. There was no great signing of, this is an amazing talent, this is an amazing woman. It was, we're interested in you, but we need to see how you develop. There was no commitment.
Absolutely. My graduation film didn't get me to a sort of like, oh my God, she's the talent, you know, here, you know, office at all. There was nothing. You know, I was very proud of it, and well, we think we did well, but at the same time, you know, you can also see how you can do better. And so you were like, so I was like, I felt like I came out with something that I thought was great, but maybe it wasn't a show off piece. It wasn't, it was very minimalistic in a way. You know, it was inside a kebab shop, and this guy who thinks he sees, you know, Maria in the grease, and so he makes a shrine and all that. So it's in a kebab shop. It didn't bring me sort of like, this is my ticket. My ticket was more just trying to sort of feel my way. If there's you know, who are the people that has the same sort of, who connect with me. So I definitely felt that there was a huge, like, okay, how do I get from this to actually making a movie? But I also remember being very sort of trusting it somehow. And I think the sort of the mental state is part of, you know, it's a huge help if you can try and not expect too much too soon, you know. And the Thomas Vinterberg, that was, again, it was, you know, we made that short film and he saw it 2 or 3 years later. It wasn't sort of, we made it, was out, and then, so it's also, we keep talking about the ticket, but it's a good, it can be something you've done in years back. So, but I remember also having this somehow believing that the right person will see my work, and it's not very show off. It's very minimalistic. I mean, the short film with kids and but it was, at least it was what I truly believed in, which is telling a story, you know, and that the images are sort of telling the story. And so I think it's also important that when you do go and make short films after film school or before film school or wherever stage you are, when you go and do your little projects, that you try and do things that you feel this is truthful to who I am. So it's not just about, I think even as a up and coming, you know, cinematographer or as a student, there's still a thing of being selective. You know, it's not just when you get to Hollywood and you get 10 films and you can pick the best one. It's from the beginning. And I think that's a thing that I was very careful what I did, but they were all sort of freebies. I wasn't paid anything, you know, but there was that short film or there was that short film. And I was like, well, you know, I can't do that short film because I don't believe that a short film can have sex and shooting and killings, and it's too fast for me. It doesn't represent who I am. So I think as a youngster and as a, you know, working your way up, that you should actually still, or you should already be selective so that you build work that you feel when people see it, this represents something that I believe in. So you don't have to go, yeah, but this short film it's not really what I want to do, and the lighting isn't so good, and because we didn't have any or whatever. You can't do that from the beginning, right from the beginning, as it is in Hollywood movies. You can't, there's no excuses. So you have to do the little things. And if you don't get a short film or an offer to make a short film that suits you, go make one. Write the terrible scripts like I did. Nobody wanted to make them because they were terrible, but you may understand what you see. And so you have work that represents you and speaks for you without you defending it. I think that's probably my key advice and what worked for me at that time. Though there wasn't feature films till many years later.
Okay, so let's move on to Thomas Vinterberg. Did you make 3 films with him, or was it 4? I
We
couldn't
did
remember. Submarino,
the
The
Hunt
Hunt, Far from
and
the Madding
Far from the
Crowd,
Madding Crowd.
the 3.
Yes, 3. Yeah.
So we've mentioned Submarino, which was a 16 mil and very low budget,
Yeah.
but it was really The Hunt.
Watch it. Great movie. I
Should
love
watch
it.
It's I'm not sure if it's that available, but you should definitely watch it. I've seen it.
You can find it.
But I think it was The Hunt that was probably the film that first kind of put you on the map. And it got Thomas Vinterberg his first Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Film for that film. And it is an incredible film and beautifully shot. We can talk about the cinematography, and if anyone's got any questions, please do use the Q&A function at the bottom, and we'll happily ask Charlotte those questions. But I also want to talk about something I know, and I don't know if many know, that you were pregnant with twins, I think, at the time.
That was the one.
It was
It was the one. The first one. Yeah.
The first one.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance that work life of, obviously you're a mother, you want to go out and make films, but you happen to be pregnant at that point? Was there any issues you had, and was there support available for you?
Yeah. So we had done Submarino together, and then Thomas asked me to do The Hunt, and it wasn't planned because and I guess there is never a time when you're a filmmaker where you feel like, okay, I'm gonna have 2 years break. You've always feel, well, if that amazing opportunity comes, I have to be ready. So I understand and remember that whole thing, and I think in my head I was sort of quite dedicated to waiting, so that I wanted to be available. And here we go, suddenly I was pregnant. I remember it was I realized 2 months before we started prep, 3 months before we started prep. So I thought, oh my God, it just sort of fitted that when we were supposed to wrap, that was 2 weeks before my due date. So it was bang on, the sort of perfect timing, or unluckily perfect timing with it. So I thought I have to go up and tell him, and I was very certain and prepared, and that obviously, it's too big a risk, and they were gonna, but life, I believe that I can't control life. And so there was never a sort of like having the baby, not having the baby. This is what, is a gift. So I went up to his summer house where he was and knocked the door, and he opened the door, and immediately he said, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing, I'm just trying to act, and I'm a terrible." And he was like, "Are you pregnant?" And apparently it was just shining out of me, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And he sort of took me and said, "Well, what are you sorry about?" I was like, well, I really want to do this, and I totally understand, and but this is life, and this is what I have to do, and and he's like, well, how do you feel? Can you not do it? And I was like, well, I think I feel good. So it was a whole sort of like feeling my way into, and he's like, well, I don't see there's a problem, and if we somehow can have a standby, why don't you just do it if you feel up for it? And just, so I credit Thomas Vinterberg also. I'm not sure every director would have done that, but he's an amazing human being, and he just all sorted out. And so we did, and we found someone who wanted to sort of stand by, and an up and coming DP that it was a great opportunity to jump in. And but I felt so strong and so up for it. And I do have some images with it. They made a special easy rig for me, because obviously the traditional one is right over your tummy, so it sort of came under the boobs, so they made a special one, and it was fun. It's a handheld movie, but I think I also learned that, yeah, you can't control life, but you also don't want to do the opposite. You also don't want to say, well, now I can't. You know, the fact that he said, what's wrong? That was exactly what I felt. I was just anticipating that, you know, the person would say that. And we had an amazing shoot, and I gave birth. I was very bad at that though, because I missed all the preparations. so giving birth was, and because I've been working with that easy rig, the midwives was saying, oh my God, are you a dancer? Are you killing the baby? Because I was like, I had so much muscle. But anyway, she came, and I also want to say, being a mom, I am now grateful that it just happened, because I think in my early years, I was extremely passionate, like I'm sure all of you are. You know, when you want to do this, you just want to do it, and you have your vision, and you know, you're confident, or you know, you should be. And I had that, and I think in my case, it was actually a healthy thing that, you know, that I got a baby, because it sort of put the whole thing into perspective, sort of calmed me down a bit, and I had to juggle the two, which is absolutely possible. There's nothing that don't anticipate anything. I think that's what I learned with Thomas in the doorway, going like, well, and so what? And I think I sort of carry that with me. I put that in my backpack. So what? You know, same thing when I directed a piece recently. You know, the concern was a director's going to want to work with you again. And that's why we didn't do it for a long time. But I suddenly remember that don't anticipate that people will put you in a box and then they don't want to use you as a DP again. So I think do what you have to do. You do not want to try and fit into a box, or so it was a great lesson. And I really want to share it. You know, just do what you need to do, and just be good at your job, you know, and try and be as calm as possible about it. Don't stress that, you know, that your email needs to be replied tomorrow, or that that's going to get you an agent now. It will happen. Yeah. Am I saying the same thing?
No, it's really great. It's the stuff that I love about you. It's your outlook on life.
Yeah.
The one thing, so let's talk about, let's use the hunt as an example. So let's talk about how you approach pre-production, working with a director. You've been given the script. How do you start to have those initial conversations about the look, how you want to construct it, and is there anything you specifically do in prep?
Yeah, there is, and I love prep. I think this whole thing, as I said earlier, that, you know, I love words, and I love writing. I'm not good at it, but I think I'm good at reading. And I think that's part of being a cinematographer as well, is that, you know, the interest of reading and sort of getting the details. You know, I read a script first time, just reading it, not trying to sort of get into. And I actually like to just do that before I have the interview, so that I'm not going like, oh, you could shoot it this way, or you can use this lenses, or I think it's a handheld movie. I don't really want to attack a director with that. I just want to tell them, you know, him or her, what I felt about the story, and, you know, so that you feel you connect. So once you get the job, hopefully, and you start prep, I read the script once or twice more, and I start sort of just finding a structure to it. So it's sort of an overall wavy thing. What is this thing? What is the overall feel? Is there an image that sort of can represent the whole thing, or what is it? And sort of just really overall sensing it. And after that, there's you know, I love to sit down. Sometimes you have a director who has the time and wants to sit down and discuss every single scene, and sometimes you have someone who doesn't. Thomas and I, for instance, with the hunt, we you know, read the script a couple of times, and then we sit down, scene 1, talk about scene 1, talk about scene 2, talk about scene 3. And then with or without the director, most often I then go away, and I go home and I revisit all the scenes, and I start collecting images or photos, you know, and put it in a book, or sort of create some lookbook of sort. Lately I've been doing it on a computer, and you just do whatever program you can put images into, and I do little text or compose something, whatever it could be that just gives you a feel for the scene. With the hunt, we decided to just do it all in a black book, and it was all sort of pieces that was, images that was put in with glue and handwriting, and but I like to have something physical, is probably the way to say it, that reminds you of all the conversations that you've had, that reminds you of the feelings that you discussed. Sometimes it could be one image for that scene. Sometimes you never really found that image, and it's more about describing what the characters, what it is that Thomas or Aaron Sorkin, whoever it is, said about this piece. I might just write it down for myself. And it's also different, Thomas likes to see this book, but other directors, like for instance Aaron Sorkin, and I did a movie called Molly's Game. He didn't really want to see it. He just wanted to give me what I needed, and then he needed me to do what I needed to do. So I still made it for myself. And so every morning I look through it, and sometimes you do what's in there, sometimes you don't, but at least it gives you feel prepared. And so each film is different, but I do want to say every movie I do have a physical something that reminds me of all the ideas. Yeah.
Do you share the lookbook with others? Would you ever share it with the production designer or with your gaffer?
Yes.
Or would you
Yeah.
do? And you
Yeah.
haven't had kind of people, without being rude, kind of going, oh, you're treading on my toes here if you've got a lookbook that's, looking at blah, blah, blah.
I mean, directors, I try to be careful, because you have to find out early if it's something you're sharing with the director or if it's something for yourself. And if it's for me that I want to share with the gaffer and with the production designer, I wouldn't, the ideas I have for a story or something like that, I'll make sure that's in a private, so that they're not getting, stuff that I want to suggest the director is not going to the production designer. Yeah. So yeah, you have to be, you don't want to sort of overdo it, so it becomes, that you're treading on the director's toes. It depends on the director, really.
So if we go back to the hunt, so with the hunt, how did you approach things like lens choice? Was Thomas, the director, interested in that, or was that something that he just left to you, or
He left it to me. However, he liked to see the test that I did. So he said, well, go and play and do what you need to do, and come show me. So he wasn't sort of pinpointing a special, but I like to sort of still, without being specific about what lenses, I like to still have, a chat, or discuss with them, or, with the directors, just say like, I feel this should be, try and get, because we were shooting digital on the hunt, and so we wanted to sort of break the hardness a bit. So I knew it wasn't, suggesting we weren't going to master prime. So I started trying to tell him, and I remember we ended on the Cooke Force, and I love the Cooke lenses, and I knew them very well. So I do, but again, some directors are like, I want to shoot anamorphic. Denzel Washington was like, he wanted to shoot anamorphic because for him, it separates the performance, and he's an actor. So he's like, I don't know what it is, you don't need to explain, but I know that when you pull to my face or to somebody else's face, it separates, and of course, yeah, the distortion in the lens just sort of makes that, and he sees that in lenses. So he was very specific, that's what he wanted. But most directors I work with leaves it to sort of to me, but I would always go and show them, some tests. Even if they don't want to, I'll force them to sit down and say, just have a look. And they might still say, I can't see the difference. Like, all right, well, I'll make a decision then. But at least try and share as much technically as possible, at least so it's sort of mentioned.
Well, this leads us into a question from Fam. Fam's asked, if the cinematographers need to use equipment that are difficult for them to use, such as cameras they've rarely used or never used before, how do you handle that equipment in working on a film set? So you might need to explain the crew, if that's explain your team around you.
I mean, it happens often that some scene requires a special tool that you haven't used before, or a camera, and I've shot a lot on film, and so when I came back to digital, the cameras were completely different than they were 5 years ago. I'm very open about it. So, I've got the team, I got an AC, a focus puller that mostly sort of handles the camera and take care of all the technical bits and pieces, which I'm very terrible at. And I'll be very open with my crew and say, listen, I haven't shot on this camera before. Can you show me? And most of the time, even before that, I'd say to the equipment house, they want to shoot on this camera. We need to use this head. I've never tried it. Can I come in and spend 2 hours with it? And every equipment house will let you in and have a look and have a feel and stuff. So I think there's an openness to just be open about what equipment you haven't used. And I think the most experienced DPs have to do that, because the world is, everything is changing all the time. So I like to go in and maybe with my camera assistant, go into the equipment house before the day that you're going to use it and just play around and let them show you what it does. The same with lighting. Every movie you go like, what kind of lights are we? Tungsten? Is it hard light? Is it HMI? What is it? And I say, why, this is what I'm thinking. I like that light and I like that light, but do you know of any other lights that gives you this feel? So I just try and describe, this is the, it's just like, this is the, this is the highlight, this, like, show them something that say, this is what I want to achieve. Can you if you know of any lights that I haven't mentioned, could you line them up and I could have a look at it and just say, I haven't tried every single lamp on this planet. So in pre-production, the gaffer will take a day and he will go to the studio or to the equipment house, and they put up lights that they've worked with that I haven't worked with, and they put them on and they compare it to a lamp that they know I know. And so you also keep sort of expanding your knowledge. So yeah, with equipment you haven't used, just be honest and go and say, listen, I need some time to figure this out. Can I play a bit?
So I'm gonna slightly fast forward a bit in your career, I think. So I would be right in saying, I think I hope I'm not butchering this. So Steven Spielberg watched The Hunt. Is that correct? And then as a result, put you forward to be the DOP on Girl on the Train, which he was.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. He produced.
Maybe I shouldn't have revealed that story.
Yeah. He was a producer on Girl on the Train. And it sounded like The Hunt was sort of that had the inspiration for them. Yeah.
So The Hunt was your Girl on the Train was your first big American movie.
Yeah.
Would that be true? And obviously, so suddenly you had a big jump up, both in terms of scale, budget, but also VFX and other elements that you might not be completely au fait with.
Yeah.
So how did you approach kind of taking that big leap into new worlds and new technology? Because that goes back to the not sure how to use equipment, because obviously you're scaling up there.
Yeah. I think same thing. I remember, because it was a big movie, it was a big budget, and it was a complicated VFX thing, because this train, we had to build it. We built the train on stage, so we obviously had to have, the plates. So if you go through a tunnel, you want to make sure that the light goes down in the train, so you needed to know your plates, and they wanted to have a house that didn't exist where the plates were, and so it was sort of 3 different locations they had to put into one. And so I think what I did was just being very honest to myself, like, I haven't done this before. And I just sat down and spent time on my own, just trying the best I could. And from what I knew to sort of come up with, this is how much I can put together. So that, at least I didn't come like, I don't know how to do this, but I sort of came with a sort of qualified I think, for what I was at the time. And they knew they hired, I wasn't that experienced. So I think I just sat down, let me do everything I can, and then go to them and say, this is how far I got. So, I'd love to have some input, or if people have things, can we make it a conversation so that we develop it? So I think openness, and I've only met that people appreciate and respect. Actually, I think I earned respect from just being very calm and very honest, and say, and sort of, and showing this is, I've done what I can, and then say, well, you can always express your vision. So if you don't know technically, at least you constantly offer something as a DP. You don't go, but I haven't done this before. You just go, so this is what I think. If we want to train there, this is just how my brain works, but it feels like we need to know what the plates are before we shoot the train. That's already something that offers up conversation. So you don't have to have all the answers. You can have one step, and then that leads into a discussion where you learn. So I think I also learned that, if that makes sense, because I'm still doing it. I'm still meeting jobs where, oh my God, I haven't done a flying Superman before, how on earth? So I think the openness and doing everything that you can, and then expressing the vision for what the finished piece should be. And then whatever components is missing, the VFX people will help you. And it happened on a quiet place as well, where it was the first time I was going to shoot, a creature. So I was operating, and I actually had the VFX. He is a superhero from ILM in Hollywood. I said, why don't you come and stand next to me? And he just spoke to me while operating. Just imagine the monster is jumping over there, pan, whoa, so he was just guiding me and said, listen, we'll fit the creature in there. But in the beginning, I was sort of being a very girly DP, going like panning over, and he's like, no, that creature's huge and it's fast. So it's like just never done it before, but I think openness and do what you can and be honest is nothing. As long as you try, people really respect that.
So after, because I know that we're running out of time, so I'm going to try and cover as much as possible. So you moved on after Girl on the Train to Fences. And there's two things I'd love to talk about Fences. First of all, it's shot on 35, I think.
Yeah, and so was Girl on a Train. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'd love to talk about your passion for film, because you do have a preference for film above digital, ideally.
How long time do you have and everybody else?
Is there a shortened way you can explain why film for you is just that bit better than digital?
Yeah. I should start by saying I love digital. I really personally, I like the Alexa camera, and I think it's an amazing camera, and you can achieve whatever you want. There's nothing wrong with it. It's different. And I think that's what I'm sort of, I keep sort of fighting is not the right word, but suggesting and hoping and arguing for the fact that there is a choice. So I think that's what I like. The Hunt, and Molly's Game, they were right for digital. For Aaron Sorkin, he needed to have, the freedom in a different, because the script was 200 pages long, and he needed long dialogue scenes. So digital was perfect. In terms of my personal, so I think the choices should always be what's right for a project. However, I probably see why film is good for many stories, because my personal sort of experience making movies is I really appreciate film, because I think it somehow keeps you closer to your prep. So, and I've told you all how I love prepping, and I love doing all these little lookbooks and pre-imagining, pre-visualizing the film. And so when you come to a set, it's with the film, because it's a light meter and it's your viewfinder and it's the set and it's the actors and it's the director, it becomes a very sort of physically making the movie. Where with digital, it's slightly more, you know, you go back to the tent and you sort of see the result almost. You review and you, what's the word? Analyze the shot. And so sometimes it gets too perfect. It's like, I don't want to analyze. And, you know, somebody's got a comment, it's a bit dark in the corner over there. Shouldn't we have a little bit more light in the corner? And I was like, what? You know, so it's sort of, and then we pump some light in because you have to see everything. And so somehow it opens up for that sort of this search for perfection, because the monitors are so brilliant, and the, you know, the 4K or 8K, whatever you want to shoot. So I really like this magical thing of not making the perfect image, but lighting your prep, lighting your ideas, lighting the conversations, lighting the words in the script. And sometimes they're a little lost when you're with that monitor, because it becomes about a dark corner. But the feel that I had from the words was actually felt a bit sort of dark in the corners, maybe. So, you know, I like the conversations with the director, because you're not watching a monitor. That's just a reference. You're looking onto set. You know, and also I can light, and that's another very important thing, is that the viewfinders on a film camera are optical. So when I look through, I you know, I'm trained to see what the final image will be. And it sort of becomes more organic, and those little mistakes sneak in. And when you watch the old movies, they're full of mistakes, but they've become, you know, it's legendary almost. So I think there's a spirit around the film. There's a freedom, but there's also a precision, you know, that you have to light with your light meter, and you have to trust what you do. And I like to shoot less. I like to sort of focus on this is what we do now. This is what we do now. So and then after all that, that's sort of the working on set, but also the quality of the image, I think is very filmic. It's cinema. So lots of reasons.
So the other thing I was going to ask you about Fences was, in Fences you were working with a director who was an actor in Denzel Washington, but it was also different because I know that the director of Girl on the Train was also an actor, I think.
He was also an actor, and so was John Krasinski.
And John Krasinski. But with Fences, I think it was the first time you'd worked with an actor directing who was actually in front of the camera as well.
Yeah.
So how did that relationship work when you had a director who was actually performing in the piece, and you were basically the only person really seeing what was happening from behind the camera?
It was an extraordinary experience. Obviously a huge learning curve. I'd only done in the States, I'd only done Girl on a Train, and I hadn't even seen the result. I came straight from Girl on a Train onto Fences. So, I mean, that part of my career was really seriously learning by doing. Every step I took was, you know, unknown ground, you know, or territory. So for me, it was obviously a huge challenge, but I guess I really loved that. And also it was a huge responsibility is the word. But with Denzel, there was a whole thing in the beginning where I went for an interview, and it's sort of a 4-hour long conversation, and he spoke for 2 hours, and it was just me and him in his flat. He sent the producers home, and he's talked, and I was trying to sort of like, yeah, I think that's great in the script, but he just sort of spoke right, and he stood up and he acted some of the scenes, and then he sat down and said, well, it doesn't seem like you get any of this. You probably don't know anything about African American culture. And I was like, what? And I got a bit upset. I was like, what? I've been trying to say something for 2 hours, but you keep interrupting me. So and then he said like, well, then speak then. So we had sort of a little argument in the middle of the thing, and I was like, well, actually, no, I'm white and from Scandinavia, but we do have, because Fences was a theatrical piece. So you know, said we do have theater in Scandinavia. And so anyway, the conversation became quite rich. And I walked out of the meeting and they offered the film. And I thought, no, I mean, how am I going to live up to this legend and such a powerful, passionate personality? So I actually turned it down and said, I'd love to do it, but I just don't know how. I'm nobody and he's somebody. And how is that relationship ever going to work? And my agent was like, you are mad. What are you doing? You crazy woman. And 2 weeks later, they called me and said, oh, we actually haven't turned it down. I was like, what? You have to. And they said, well, we think you should reconsider. And I said, well, if I reconsider, I'd like to meet Denzel again, because I think we need to find out, you know, he spoke for 2 hours and he was quite sort of didn't let me in at all. If that happens on the set, I don't know what to do. So I flew all the way from Denmark to LA, walked in his office, and I on the plane I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna say? And I thought, well, you just have to be honest and say exactly what your problem is. So I opened the door and I walked, and I was so nervous. I walked right up to him and said, I came over here just to say that I'm a collaborator. And he just, well, so am I. And I was like, well, you know, it felt like, and he said, listen, it's going to be fine. And I think that sort of thing of the honesty of saying, you know, I'm nobody, and how I'd love to do this movie, but I don't know how I can match that. So what do you think? And he said, well, you know, I'm acting, performing, I'm going to have to trust you. And so we had a conversation. I think that's what I wanted to say with this whole story. There was sort of a conversation first about how do we do this? And once we got going, there was actually a certain trust. And so it became a very smooth thing had we not had that conversation. And I think that's what I want to say also. If you get to a job where you feel this setup is I don't know how to work with this amazing director or somebody who's more experienced than you, just get it sort of settled in the beginning, or at least bring up the conversation, say, listen, I got ideas, I got a vision for this story, I feel I sense what you want, all that is perfect, but let's just be honest. I can't chase you. So and so because of that, it actually became a very balanced and extraordinary experience. And he never let me down. He kept his promise, and he can get very he can get very passionate, and I was told off a couple of times, but always, you know, the reasons were always something creative in the movie. So it was
about finding that relationship.
Sorry?
About finding that relationship.
Yeah, and that's what you want to do in prep as well. You know, the prep is not only, you know, finding your images and preparing. It doesn't matter if it's a short film or if it's a Hollywood film. It's the same thing. But and on short films as well, you want to find out you want to feel that director, because only then can you find this vision together without it being a fight.
So jumping ahead again, so obviously I think I'm right in saying that Emily Blunt was the lead in Girl on the Train, and she introduced you to John Krasinski, who was her husband, who was at that time looking for a DP for A Quiet Place, and you managed to win that role. Talking about A Quiet Place, I am curious, this sounds like a ridiculous question, but did you ever think, how do you visualize silence?
Oh yeah, it's not a ridiculous question, Duncan. It's a very good question.
Because I'm fascinated about how you decided to shoot that, build that tension, and create that world.
Yeah, it was very much a sort of search and discovery into the sound design, which on every other movie that I had done, it sort of is, you have it, you know, for some scenes, you know that there is going to be a whatever sound design, but it's not sort of leading the story, whereas in this one, it had to. And I think after doing A Quiet Place, I've become so much aware of how interesting it is to sort of also pre-imagine what the sound can do for a certain scene. So anyway, so we sort of realized, obviously in collaboration with John Krasinski, the director who's also acting in it, that because of people in this movie are trying to be quiet, because there are these monsters that if they make us, they react to sound. So if they make sounds, people make sounds, these creatures will hear you and come and eat you. So this thing of hearing, making sure that there will be a sound to sound, we realized, well, you actually have to have the lens quite close, because then you would hear this. If I'm on a long lens on a 200 mil out there somewhere, this sound would not. So people in the cinema feel distance through, choice of lenses. So the long lenses and the wide lenses close, or a close shot from far away, became a very important choice. So the lens choice wasn't just from a pretty image or telling the story sort of from the words in the script, because they weren't there. Well, they were description wise, but it was more sort of like imagining, for instance, when do we, because it was a thriller sort of horror movie, there's also a scare in the sound cut. So if you're in a long lens far away and you cut to a wide lens close, there's a cut in sound, because suddenly you come close to something. And so that idea sort of kicked us off in terms of what will this film look like and what is the dynamic of lens choices. So on that, the lenses and the distance and wide angle long lenses became sort of our spade, or what, the shovel into the film. And then obviously that sort of kept expanding as John and I developed the visual language. It became more detailed as we go along. But that was sort of the main idea. There was another thing, which was John's sort of like, he loved very slow moves. So when we were far away, just this thing that something's ever so slightly moving, it's not creepy, but it's just uncomfortable, but also very beautiful. So it's a conflict of emotional sort of, what is this, creepy or is it just beautiful? So there was a very amazing challenge, and that was also shot on film, which we fought for. And I think it was a big concern for producers, because there's a lot of VFX work, and people tend to say that it's better or easier to make to work with digital, but wasn't a problem.
So I'm aware that we are, if anyone wants to ask questions, because we're going to devote the last 15 minutes to questions, but I'm going to jump ahead one last thing to Black Narcissus. So I don't completely know the story of this. So were you hired, or were you approached to direct it first, or were you approached to shoot it first, and then the option of directing came about? How did you get on board this project?
So I did Far From the Madding Crowd with Thomas Vinterberg, which we shot in Dorset, and DNA was the production company, and Andrew McDonnell and Ellen Reich is the producers on that film. And so on Far From the Madding Crowd, I just had a really lovely, wonderful relationship and friendship with the two of them. And and after that, they were, every now and then saying, maybe you should direct, or maybe one day. And so it sort of was an ongoing thing for 3, 4, 5 years. And so one Christmas, 3 Christmases ago, I think I received an email from Andrew, and he just said, listen, we're looking at doing this project called Black Narcissus. Would you read to direct? Would you consider? And I was like, I mean, that Black Narcissus? No, I don't think so. But of course I said, well, I'm happy to read, but it sounds like a big one. So I read and was a bit like the script, but also this whole conversation with my, with my agents, and, I was sort of on a roll with a DPing, and was that going to break that? So there was more to it than just sort of the project. And once I pulled that thing out of the backpack of Thomas saying, you know, what's wrong? Do what you need to do. Just don't anticipate. And I remember it's like, well, you got one life. And if you want to try this, who says that you can't DP again? So I sort of was, and then at the same time, Andrew was saying, why don't you try and read the novel? And I read the novel that Ruma Godden wrote in 1937. And I mean, I hadn't read it before. I'd only seen the old movie, which I love, but the novel, I absolutely, it's amazing. And I thought, you know, it's producers I know really well and like very much, and this is a chance, and it's TV, so it's a mini series, so I'm not sort of stepping on my director Hollywood feature film, so I'm not stepping on their toes. It's in London, and so I started telling myself it's definitely a challenge, but maybe it's a fun one. So it started with the directing, and definitely we were looking for, you know, DPs, and that was, I had a short list, and some of the names were people that I look up to, which it wasn't possible for the BBC budget to sort of get them on board. But I think the more we sort of gone into shortlisting, and I was very excited about working with a DP, I think it also sort of came, why haven't you put yourself on this list from other people? And I was like, well, because I haven't. And that sort of, when that sort of was discussed, suddenly I think everybody realized, and I realized, actually, I'm not a director. I'm a DP. You know, I'm going to direct this, but who knows? I might be absolutely terrible at it. And so what I know is DPing, and I've been very close to actors and directors through the DPing, and been very close to directing because I worked a lot with actors who was also performing, and suddenly they disappear into costumes for half an hour. And so, you know, I was running the set, and I realized maybe I don't know how to sing without that guitar. I'm not sure I can leave that guitar to actually get to the thing. So it became sort of a safety thing, I think, you know, something for me to hold on to not sort of hand my hands free and not. So I spoke to the actors and asked them, well, how do you feel if I'm shooting it? And they said, well, you know, absolutely fine. And so we just made sure I had an A team. John Higgins Biggles was my gaffer, who's amazing. He came off 1917, and Ashley Bond was my AC. So I had a dream team on the camera. So, and it worked really well.
So, I mean, you also did one other role, which is you operated yourself. So there were three.
Yeah.
You really, you took every level.
Yeah. Crazy.
I have to ask, was there any times during it where you thought, which hat have I got on at the moment? Hang on a minute.
There probably was, but it wasn't not in a way where it felt sort of as a, you know, disastrous or anything. I had a team, I had an amazing AD, Zoe, who just helped me structure it. And so it became its own thing. You know, it was very sort of, first we do this, then we do that, then like old-fashioned filmmaking. So it might have been a bit chaotic at times. I remember you guys came out, twice. Duncan came out with two different teams, and the first time I remember was a normal day, and the second day was, we had a lot of pressure on to finish the scene. And when you're both lighting and operating, and I remember that.
Yeah, the first time we came was a night shoot when you were doing the palace.
That's right.
That was awesome just to watch you light. But the second time was on stage at Pinewood. And that time, obviously, you were totally focused on the film. And I have to say, I was kind of like, where should I put myself? I was so felt in the way.
But I think you also there sort of in the last 15 minutes. And we had that specific day was like, we have to finish the kitchen. We cannot come back to the kitchen. And we were missing certain things. So, you know, obviously, like any film shoot, you know, that when you sort of leave location and you're dreaming about, you know, having a few other things, pressures on. But I can only say that whole thing was a team. It was a it was a team. It was team playing. What's the word? Collaboration that made that all work.
And not that we'll reveal anything, but since then you've gone on to shoot one film and you've got another film coming up, I think. So you've gone back to your
Yes.
DPing.
So I'm DPing at the
plan.
moment. Yes, which I love. And so, however, I'm reading a lot of scripts for directing, and when I find that story, I'm not in a hurry. It might be in 5 years' time, it might be in 2, it might be in 10, but I definitely is quite keen to explore it further. But for now, yeah, so I went on to DP a project called All the Old Knives, which is a spy movie that I've never done, with Chris Pine in the lead and Tandy Newton. So we shot in London, and it was during the COVID, but it was possible because 80% of the film is taking place in a restaurant with 2 people. It's supposed to be California, so we had big LED screen out, and so that was fun. And then now I'm off to New York to shoot a film with Julianne Moore called Shopper. So another DP job, which should be I'm very excited about that. Yeah, so DPing for a bit.
Good. Okay, let's if anyone's got some questions, let's send them in. We've got one from Sophie. Do you have any advice on how to move from short films to feature films, and how to convince the production that you can do it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back a little bit to what I said earlier. I think that whole thing of I guess we all have to sort of find our luck. It is a tricky thing because so many people, are educating themselves in this business, and there's only that many movies. But my advice is to keep practicing what you're doing and do it the way that excites you, if that makes sense. So for me, it was, writing these short films or short film scenes. And if nobody wanted to do them, make them, I would go and just practice, and I would share it. So, and the important bit is to finish it, because also there's another thing. You go and do something and you cut it a bit, and then something comes up and then you leave it. This thing of completing what you're doing so that you can share it. It is the only way to sort of look for that luck, to look for that thing ending up with someone who is looking for you, because they are out there. And it isn't just the big DP. People are, especially this time, there's so many projects now that it opens up, and the world is thankfully opening up to women as well. So my advice is to complete your stuff, and don't stress it. Don't feel like a feature film has to keep doing what you're doing, or write little things. It can be 2-minute film that you feel this represents who I am. Make sure that your reel has only put the things that you feel, I'm proud of this. I feel this speaks for me, without me defending it. I think that's my, and don't give up. Just keep making it. It will come, and the best you can, share it. And if you can, Instagram is great, but try and get it to people who got a contact, or that it's the old-fashioned sort of spreading the word somehow.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Okay, we've got a question from Fam. How does being the director and the cinematographer help you direct in Black Narcissus?
Help me direct Black Narcissus.
I'm guessing you didn't have a conversation with yourself about the lookbook. I
did, Duncan. I had a very serious conversation, and there were times where we were joking on set where it was like, by the way, I'm the DP now. I want this shot, But I think, to answer your question, it helped me direct, because lighting and framing is how I've trained myself for 15, 20 years now to translate a script. So that's what I know. And I suddenly realized maybe I can direct, but I'm going to use the tools that I know. I'd be silly not to. So the DPing sort of made me pre-visualize what I've been doing so far, but now I could also speak to the actors. So instead of thinking about the directing job as a as a directing job. I just saw it as the same thing, but I have access to the production designer, the costume designer, and in a sort of leading role. So it became the core thing for me, the cinematography, and the directing just added to it. So I wasn't creating myself as a director and then, oh, and I also have to DP. It was one thing. I hope that answers the question.
Got another question. So do you still watch films from new directors? And if you see a director you like, do you approach them and say, I'm interested in working with you?
I definitely I love watching films from new upcoming directors. So yes, do I approach them? I haven't yet, but I would. If I see that film where I think this is what that's where I want to go, I would absolutely, probably through my agent, contact people. But I do often get contacted directly from young directors, and I as much as I can, I try to read and respond. So I think I'm definitely searching. And the next film I'm doing is, he's an experienced director because he's done a lot of episodes on The Crown, and he's doing Star Wars now. So but TV, but so he's very experienced. However, it's his first feature film, so yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Got a question from Abdullah. I'm a big fan of your work, and it's a pleasure to have this masterclass. What is your favorite film? And what is your advice to anyone who wants to shoot on film?
Oof, my favorite film. Wow.
I'm gonna judge you on this, Charlotte.
Well, I got a lot of favorite films, but I got one that's very inspiring, and I think I watch it every year before I'm, is an Ingmar Bergman movie called Persona. I love that film because it probably is the core of how I've trained myself. So without it being necessarily the best story, I also think it's an amazing, but it's a monologue, and it's two actors in a summer house, two women in a summer house, and it's basically, one is not talking and the other one is obviously having a monologue. But it's such a beautiful, well told, beautiful story that it's inspired me in every way, not only as a cinematographer, but also as a filmmaker. But I love Cinema Paradiso. I love Bruus Cassidy. I love, I could go on. But Persona has inspired me in many ways. And that was one shoot and film.
The other point was, how do you, let me just quickly get the exact wording. What is your advice to anyone who wants to shoot on film?
Is go to Kodak and tell and say, I need some help. I need to persuade producers, or I need to try and, can you give me some test stock? And then if you have a project and you want to try and persuade them to shoot on film, try and do some tests, make sure the director is excited about it. But I think it's important to sort of involve other people, so that you've got people with you, an army that can fight for film, because it's very hard to sort of win that on your own. But Kodak and also the equipment houses are very helpful if you want to try and use a film camera and at least shoot something that could be a little mood board or a little mood film for the film, so that people see and that you get a feel for it. And you go to Kodak, go to Arri or Panavision, and see if you can sort of get something on film to help you persuade producers.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up because I've already kept you over the time I promised, and I've got to give you back to
no worries.
Daughters. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, Charlotte. Thank you so much for talking to me. You're still one of my favorite DPs. Always.
Duncan. Well, thanks for having me and for wanting to listen in, for sure.
Thank you for always listening to my babble when I text you. even when you're busy shooting.
Always.
And good luck for your shoot in September, I think you said it was.
Yeah, we'll shoot in September, but yeah, I'll always, whenever I can, I just always try and join in, and I love sharing, and I'm sad I can't see you all because it gives a lot back, and I love talking to up and coming people as well, so hopefully next time we can
I
get
promise.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.
See you later, everyone. Thank you, Charlotte.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.